BookTok ruined books. I'm never gonna forgive BookTok for what they did to books. Well, actually, reading levels have been steadily declining over the— BookTok is to blame for everything! Well, technically, it's all BookTok's fault. I can't believe such trash is being published nowadays. Oh, okay, I can see you feel very strongly about this, but every book on BookTok is absolute garbage. There's no critical thinking. There's no reading comprehension. These books suck. This is what we're talking about today. Hey everybody, me again. I am a multi-genre independent author, one pen name TR Slauf for all things dark, gory, and depressing, and the other pen name Margot Primrose for all things romantic and swoon-worthy. Here we talk about anything and everything affecting the book community, and you get my thoughts and opinions unscripted. Today we have a bit of a doozy. We're going to talk about BookTok. That is right, I am going to poke that bear. If you've ever spent any time on BookTok, you know they get very angry very easily. There's always some sort of drama. People are complaining about anything and everything, attacking each other in the comments. And you know what? Everybody else makes fun of them. Is it valid? Is it justified? Or is BookTok a scapegoat? So I have seen videos, blogs, Instagram posts, you name it, just absolutely taken the piss out of BookTok. BookTok, if you don't know, is the community on TikTok that talks about books. Book recommendations, book reviews, book hauls, library hauls, authors are on there promoting their own books. Seems pretty straightforward and pretty normal. Seems like every other social media platform where the book community congregates. So what makes this one so different? One thing that I've noticed is that the thing that makes BookTok different is every other platform loves to hate BookTok. I just closed my curtain because I looked like a ghost. So what do I mean when I say every platform loves to hate BookTok? Well, I'm sure you've seen it or heard about it in one way or another. People have been making videos and blogs talking about how BookTok has ruined books. BookTok has ruined literature. There are so many of these. There's legitimate critiques mixed in, but a lot of them are just blaming BookTok for everything and anything that is wrong with modern literature, in their opinion. There are so many of these videos. I have not watched all of them, and this video that I'm doing today is absolutely not in response to a single video. Just want to make that very clear. This is just my thoughts and opinions in general about this phenomenon that I've been seeing. A lot of the complaints that have been circling about BookTok are that BookTok has caused the tropification of books, as if books did not have tropes before BookTok. I did make an entire video about this, talking about how with modern social media, you have less than 7 seconds to market a book or talk about a book. And when you have less than 7 seconds, a lot of people are going to pull out one-line taglines, or they're just going to pull out highlights and tropes to get people's attention. Tropes are not new. BookTok did not invent tropes. Okay? If you want more in-depth thoughts on that topic, I'm not going to go into this tropification past this point. So if you want my more in-depth thoughts about that, I'm going to link that video below. Another complaint people have about BookTok is that it is anti-intellectualism. It is causing the rise of anti-intellectualism in Western countries. It's causing the rise of anti-intellectualism in our youth. Another complaint is that all of the books on BookTok suck. Just in general, everybody hates BookTok. They think that the rise of crappy literature and crappy books is all BookTok's fault. They think that the rise in straightforward writing, the lack of show don't tell, the lack of deep themes is all BookTok's fault. They think that people not being able to critically think about the books that they're reading, and they also spout that people not being able to comprehend what they're reading, that reading comprehension levels have decreased because of BookTok. I don't fully agree with these takes. No. There was an article published in October of 2024 by The Atlantic titled "The Elite College Students Who Cannot Read." Later on, that very same article was republished under a different name because one of the people that they quoted and used that quote for the article's title complained that they were misquoted. So the article is now published under the name The Elite College Students Who Cannot Read Books. This article caused quite the stir. There are a lot of people reviewing this article in depth. There's so many people responding to it, both on YouTube and their own written articles. I actually went and got on the Atlantic so I could read it. Mostly so I could do this video, but also because I was really curious about what this article was that caused so much controversy. I took a bunch of notes, and I'm going to share them with you. Now, the first thing that I have to say about this article, I had to create a freaking account on the Atlantic so I could read it. I had to create an account and give them a password and give them my PayPal information just so I could read one article. Why in the hell do I need an account for every single website? Okay, this is probably one of my biggest boomer complaints. I need to make an account for every single website now. I hate it. I hate it. So already points against the article. That's a joke. Don't take that too seriously. So once I started reading it, I noticed that this article, one thing I really liked about it is a lot of it was interviews. It was interviews with professors as well as high school and middle school educators. And I think that's important because the educators, no matter what grade level you're at, the educators are the ones that are dealing with the students day in, day out, and they've been doing it for decades. They are going to be the ones that notice trends. They are going to be the ones who are going to have reliable information and feedback about what's going on. However, I did notice that a lot of the people who were interviewed were from elite colleges. Now, granted, the title is The Elite College Students Who Cannot Read Books. So, I mean, I wasn't really surprised. I do wish that they had a wider breadth of professors that they had interviewed. But granted, it's one person writing this article. They probably only had a limited amount of time to do it. I get it. Okay, so the article starts out with a quote from the author of the article, Rose Horowitz. It says, "To read a book in college, it helps to have read a book in high school." Honestly, I think that quote really sets the tone for the article and what the article is about. And I think it also explains a lot of people's complaints and gripes with modern books. One of the first anecdotal interviews in the article is from a professor at Columbia. This professor said that he had a student come to his office hours complaining that she could not read the books in the syllabus in time for the lectures and the assignments. This student went on to tell her professor that in high school, they had never required to read a full book. She went through her entire high school career not being assigned an entire book front to end to read. She said they were only assigned excerpts, poetry, and articles. Her entire high school career, she was not given a full book to read for an assignment. This professor was flabbergasted. His gabber was flaccid. He went and he asked other professors and he looked into it. They all corroborated this story. They said they had other students tell them the same thing. They said that this was not uncommon. This same professor goes on to say that it wasn't just the reading pace that his college students struggled with. They struggled to attend to small details while keeping track of the overall plot. This begs the question, do these students struggle to attend to the small details while keeping track of the overall plot because they were only assigned excerpts in high school? The article goes on to say that no comprehensive data exists on the above topic, but 33 professors were interviewed for this article and many agreed. So this is saying they don't have hard data for this. And that makes it very hard to draw conclusions. A lot of it is going to be speculation and anecdotal. I do not say that word correctly. I'm aware I don't say that word correctly. Moving on. The article then goes on to show statistics from 1976. 40% of high school seniors read at least 6 books for fun. and 11.5% of high school seniors had not read any books. This was in 1976. Whereas in 2022, those numbers flipped. So that would mean only 11.5% of high school seniors had read at least 6 books for fun, whereas 40% of high school seniors had not read anything. Now, I was a student once. I'm sure you were too, or you currently are. We all know there's those kids, they sit in the back of the classroom, they never do the homework, they kick their feet up, they cause a ruckus, or they just keep to themselves, but they never do the frickin' work. That's not new. That's been around since forever. But the fact of the matter that it is now being reported that an estimated 40% of high school seniors have not read a book at all, that is ridiculous to me. I can't fathom that. What is going on with this? The article continues on to say that educational incentives such as No Child Left Behind and Common Core emphasized standardized tests and informational text. Teachers now provide shortened texts asking students what the main idea of the author was. I'm going to evaluate this a little bit more, but let's go on to the next quote that I pulled out from the article first. The vice president of National Council of Teachers of English, who was also a previous public school teacher, was quoted saying, "The new guidelines were intended to help students make clear arguments and synthesize text. But in doing so, we've sacrificed young people's ability to grapple with long-form text in general." Another teacher with 2 decades at Boston, New York schools was quoted saying, "Excerpts have replaced books across grade levels. There's no testing skill that can be related to, can you sit down and read Tolstoy? If a skill is not easily measured, instructors and district leaders have little intention to teach it." Another expert who specializes in designing curricula across the country says educators stopped teaching novels they long revered. When the pandemic hit, syllabi were scrambled and the shift away from full works was accelerated. So that means that over the years, educators have been pushing more towards standardized test performance. If you have been in the school system recently, this should not come as a shock to you. I graduated from high school in 2012, and already this shift was happening. It wasn't quite this exaggerated though, but I do recall constantly being focused and having entire lessons, entire days, weeks, months even focused on how do you pull information out of this little excerpt and fill in a bubble sheet that is accurate. Or you read this excerpt and write an essay very quickly about it. It wasn't, oh, stop and think. It was very much do this under pressure, do it quickly, and do it as right as possible for your standardized test. Now, the article goes on to say that they conducted a survey of 300 3rd through 8th grade teachers. Nearly a quarter of them said books are no longer the center of their curricula. So this survey of these 300 3rd through 8th grade teachers, it really just kind of pushes this fact home that books are being removed from schools. Books are being taken out of the classroom, which is a problem. Even outside of whether or not good novels are being written, what in the world are we doing? You're supposed to read when you're in school. Yes, they're still reading excerpts and articles, but what are we doing to our young people when we're not preparing them to have the attention span needed to sit and read more than a page at a time? Granted, I don't actually know how long these excerpts are. They might be 3 pages. I don't know. One thing I will point out, I did like that the article included some counter arguments. One of the big counter arguments is that they talked about professors who disagree with this. They disagree with the idea that students cannot read books. These professors who disagree with this mindset their general ideas were that It is a shift in priority rather than skill, meaning the students can read but choose not to. They go on to elaborate that modern students in college are more concerned with job prospects than they were in the past. Current students report spending as many hours at jobs or extracurriculars as they do on academia. I think that's a really important part of this discussion because when I went through college, I did not have funding. I came from a humble background. The only reason I was able to go to such a good high school was because I was bused to a different district. Actually, I couldn't even take the bus because I lived in a different district. I had to be driven by my parents every morning, which they reminded me they didn't like doing every day. Anyway, that meant that if I wanted a college education, which by the way, I was told from the time I was a tiny child in school that that was the only way to get a job. What are you going to do? So the only way I was able to get my college education was I was working two, sometimes three jobs at a time to put myself through school. It is really hard to keep up with reading an entire book in a week for one class while you're also working 30 plus hours a week at various different jobs. So I do like that they included this part in the article because, granted, I wasn't alive back then. I wasn't a college student back in the 50s or the 70s, so I can't speak from experience that the shift happened. But based on what I have heard anecdotally, I do believe that this is different nowadays. Students are working more jobs trying to put themselves through school. So I do appreciate that this article pointed that out. Now, here is where the article and the article's author lost me. Because up until this point, the author of the article was really just collecting interviews and they were collecting responses from surveys that they had with teachers and just presenting what was being said. And that's very, straightforward, unbiased. You're getting the teachers who are working with the students every single day. Up to this point, that's what they were doing. This last part of the article, this is how the article ended, and this really put a sour taste in my mouth for the whole article and especially for the author of this article. Let me go through. So it starts with a quote from a professor saying, "In the past, this professor would ask first-year college students what their favorite books were. The answers used to be Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre. Now they lean more towards YA. Percy Jackson seems to be popular." And then the author of the article adds in their own 2 cents on this, saying, "Royden's series, although full of frothy action and sometimes sophomoric humor, also cleverly engages in a literary exercise as old as the Western canon, spinning new adventures for the petulant gods and compromised heroes of Greek mythology. But of course, there is a reason that despite millennia of reinterpretations, we've never forgotten the originals. To understand the human condition and to appreciate humankind's greatest achievements, you still need to read the Iliad, all of it." The reason the author of this article lost me with that quote is because this author is implying that the only book that can represent human suffering, human triumph, human achievement is the Iliad. And some of the language I think she used to describe the Percy Jackson series, like the sophomoric comedy, that sounded a little bit backhanded. Now, why are YA books bad? Just because a book is written to be read and understood and enjoyed by a younger audience does not automatically mean that the book is bad. And it does not automatically mean that the book doesn't have depth And it does not mean that the book cannot show human suffering and the human condition. It just means that these topics and these themes are explained in a way that can be read by a 13-year-old. Now, I do agree that by the time you are 18, your reading level should be above YA, but that doesn't necessarily mean YA books are bad. YA books are for ages 12 to 17, and this is because this doesn't just encompass writing style, this encompasses themes and content. There is a reason people get mad when there's someone who wants a spicy scene in a YA book. It's because YA books are supposed to be safe for 12-year-olds to read. So this article reminded me of this new trend that I have also been seeing on TikTok and YouTube. There have been droves and droves of teachers taking to these various social media apps to tell people what is happening in their classrooms. And the pictures they are painting are not pretty. There is a teacher, his TikTok video went freaking viral, off the charts. There's over 3.3K comments on this video. Do you know what he said in this video? He said he teaches 7th grade, and his 7th grade students are reading at a 4th grade level. And he goes on to say that this is not new. He goes on to say that the parents are so detached from what's happening with their children that most of them don't know this. He goes on to talk about how this is happening across the board, how this has been happening since he started, but it has gotten much worse these past few years. There was another teacher who had a whole video talking about how when she first started teaching, she had a day where someone sat in her classroom to do an evaluation. Now, she goes on to explain that this is very normal and this is a good thing because teachers should be evaluated, and she has no problem with the fact that she was evaluated. However, at the end of the evaluation, she was called in for a meeting to discuss what they saw during her teaching evaluation. I said evaluation like 6 times in a row. Sorry about that. But she was told by her district administrators or her district leaders that she was spending too much time on books. She was spending too much time on books, and they wanted her to take books out of her teaching curriculum. They wanted her to instead focus on standardized tests. This teacher goes on to explain that she was very new when this happened, and she was not quite yet confident enough to tell the administrators to fuck off. I probably shouldn't say that. I can cut it. I'll cut it. She goes on to explain that she listened because she was new, she was nervous, she didn't have years of experience under her belt at the time. So she complied. She used to take her students down to the library, and she used to have carts of books in her classroom for them to pick up and read and write reports on or read at their own leisure. And instead, she got rid of it. She cut down reading time in class. She started focusing more on standardized tests and pulling out those key pieces of information for the standardized testing type setup. Now, looking back at it, this same teacher said that that was wrong. The entire thing was wrong. She was wrong for complying, and the district was wrong for asking her to do it in the first place. And the really sad thing is, each of these videos are not unique. Each of these videos have numerous comments underneath them from teachers and parents alike complaining about this same issue. There are schools that have eliminated library time. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, we would have a period of time where our grade school class would go to the library and we could pick out books and take them home with us. This was not a very long period of time, but still it allowed our grade school class to explore and bring books home with us. For me, this was great because like I mentioned, I grew up in a very small town. I had to go to a different district for school. I didn't have a library. And my parents wouldn't take me to the library that was next to my public school that I was going to. So the only time I got to go pick up books was when my whole class went to the library. So these times of taking students to the library have been eliminated or severely reduced. And so many teachers are talking about how the reading levels have been decreasing and reading comprehension has been decreasing with their students every single year. I looked up another article from the National Center for Educational Statistics. This article stated that just 37% of high school seniors reached or exceeded academic readiness levels or academic preparedness levels, meaning everybody else was below. And this is for math, science, and reading. What are we doing to our students? All of this educational statistics, everything I am saying to you ties together. This argument of students not being able to read and students not having critical thinking skills, it has been around for quite a while. Like I mentioned, I myself graduated from high school in 2012. And I remember when I was in school, I remember hearing people talking about reading enough. I remember hearing people talk about how reading comprehension was going down. This is not new. This is not something that just popped up out of nowhere on us. This has been building for a very long time. So why am I bringing this up in my TikTok video? Well, there's a reason for that. The reason is, I'm sitting here looking at all of these people who hate TikTok, and I'm really thinking, is TikTok the reason reading comprehension and critical thinking skills are down? Is TikTok really the reason you don't like popular books? Or is TikTok the result of our education that has been happening for decades? So if you don't know this, BookTok exploded during the pandemic. So everything got shut down. People weren't allowed to go out to bars or movie theaters or all the places that they would normally go to socialize and fill their free time. And during the time of the lockdown, a lot of people turned to books. People who hadn't picked up books in years gave it a shot. And in addition to that, people were just on TikTok more in general because, you're not allowed out of your house. How else are you going to socialize with people outside of social media and your phone? Those two things combined together gave rise to BookTok. And not just BookTok, because social media book spaces were popular before the pandemic, but BookTok really exploded during the pandemic. And the result was you had all these people from all these different walks of life, different countries, all reading and talking about their books. You had people who hadn't picked up books in years falling in love with the written word again. Sounds like a great thing to me. A lot of people disagree, though. A lot of people hate the books being pushed on BookTok. And honestly, I can understand where some of this criticism is coming from. I really can. I mean, when I first joined BookTok, a lot of the books that were being recommended to me, like a lot of the really big creators, only talked about the same books. You would get the people that would talk about the same, like, 3 romance fantasy books. Then you would get people that would talk about the same, like, 3 very dark taboo romance books. And you're just sitting there flailing like a fish, like, I don't want to read either of these. Where do I go? And so, like, when I first joined, it took me quite a while to get my algorithm set so I got more variety. But like I said before, a lot of the really, really big accounts pushed the same books over and over again. So it was very difficult for me to find my niche within this social media app to find books that I actually enjoyed. And even still today, for my pen name for horror, it is almost impossible to find people on BookTok. I don't use BookTok for my horror pen name very much anymore because of that, because the demographic on BookTok seems to really prefer romance and all the different flavors of romance. Now, this is a generalization. That does not mean that every single person on BookTok only reads romance. However, I do understand how someone who is not used to BookTok going on there and all they see are these really big accounts pushing the same romance books or pushing very spicy romance books. If that's not your thing, that's going to take you off. And I get it. I really do get it. But this anger, I do believe, is misplaced. Another thing that I think we do need to consider is the fact that there are certainly some pockets of the BookTok community that misbehave, to be quite frank. And honestly, this happens in every community. It doesn't matter if you're in the horror book or the fantasy book or the romance fantasy book or the sci-fi book community, there's going to be individuals within that community that misbehave. Now, the problem is that a lot of times on BookTok specifically, the people who misbehave, their videos are the ones that go viral. Their responses are the ones that go viral. They're the ones that everybody ends up talking about. I have noticed a lot of things on TikTok thrive on controversy more so than other social media apps. Maybe I still haven't perfected my algorithm. Maybe it's because my algorithm is still just pushing that crap and I need to clean it up more. I'm not positive. We can't ignore the fact that there are people in the BookTok community who misbehave. We all remember that serial killer incident. What the actual hell? If you don't know, I'm sorry to have to explain this to you because I would rather you stay ignorant. But there was a serial killer. I do believe his name was Wade something. He murdered and I believe he raped and murdered all of these women that he killed. And an author went, I like him. He's got the BookTok vibes. I want him to be my dark romance male lead. She quite literally used pictures from his trial to market her book. And there were people who loved it and went along with it. Now, there were people in the community that called her out on this and told her, don't do this, this is sick. But there were other people in the community that ate it up. They ate it up with a spoon. They got that straw. They left no crumbs. Another incident that happened was there was a young man, I believe he was 16 or he turned 16 when all of this was happening. He was on TikTok acting like a typical dumb teenager with his guitar, thinking he was cool because what 16-year-old doesn't do that? And some people in the BookTok community decided that he had the vibes, whatever that means. They decided that they thought he was good for spicy books. He had the face for spicy books. He had the vibes for spicy books. And they would leave him comments on his videos that were very inappropriate. And they would talk about propositioning him and all of these things that they wanted to do to him. They would make their own videos talking about this kid. And I ask you this. If the roles were reversed and it was a bunch of men, adult men doing this to a young girl, everybody would be up in arms. I'm not saying it doesn't happen to women. Okay, I get it. I was a teenager once. I got a lot of really weird shit. I get it. Men do it. But typically when men do it, if you tell somebody about it, typically you'll be able to find people who are like, oh, this is inappropriate. We'll get you off this app. So I do understand that there are issues with the community. There are individuals within the community who act very badly and do gross things. But a lot of these people who are lamenting BookTok and throwing them under the bus and blaming them for everything, they're not differentiating the people who are literally just there to talk about books and not harass children. They're not differentiating between the group of us that are all horrified by these behaviors. They're lumping everyone together and tossing the whole thing in the bin. Another point that I have is that a lot of people who complain about BookTok books talk about the critical thinking and the reading comprehension. The reading comprehension issue is not new. It's really not. I have noticed this being a problem. I remember being in high school and all of these kids complaining that they couldn't understand any of the books we were reading. They couldn't understand the themes. They couldn't, even with Spark Notes, they didn't get Shakespeare. Now, granted, sometimes Shakespeare is really annoying and it's like, just say it, dude. But seriously, even if you are using the Spark Notes, it should help you understand it. And if we've gotten to this point where we have detached ourselves so much from books that no one can comprehend what they're reading, that is a problem. And it's not because of BookTok. Like, come on. BookTok is just people talking about these books that happen to not agree with you. BookTok is just where people can talk about their opinions on books, even if those opinions are wrong. BookTok is where people can talk about their thoughts, their feelings, and the conclusions that they have drawn from these books, even if the conclusions are way out of left field. Another example I have of this is Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. This is a great example of how reading comprehension problems are not new. So, one of my favorite Ray Bradbury stories is about how he wrote Fahrenheit 451 because he was very against the rise in television, which I think is hilarious because he ended up having a TV miniseries, but that was years later. I just find that hilarious. Back to my original story. Ray Bradbury hates TV. He's worried that the rise in TV is going to make us all stupid, it's going to make us all sheep, and we're going to start having firefighters burn books. That's why he wrote Fahrenheit 451. A lot of students in college and wherever they thought they were so with it. They thought, oh yeah, I totally get the point of this book. It's about censorship. And one time Ray Bradbury was at a college seminar and he was doing like a Q&A, and he got into an argument with a student who kept insisting his book was about censorship. Ray Bradbury got so pissed, he picked up a chair and yeeted it at the student. That is the level of unhinged I aspire to be as an author. Just a little side note. And it kind of reminds me there's this age old argument of whether or not the curtains are just blue. So if you are unfamiliar with this argument, what it stems from is that when you're in high school or college or wherever you are, you read the book and your teacher says the curtains are blue because it represents the deep depression and longing within the main character. Whereas in reality, the author was like, I just needed a descriptive word and I picked it at random. Now, there's two sides to this argument. One side says people do look too into it. People see what they want to see. The other side is, well, sometimes the curtains are blue for a frickin' reason. Both sides can be right at the same time. And I think people forget that. I think people forget that, yes, sometimes authors do very purposefully put specific themes and symbolism within their books. Sometimes they just need to pick a frickin' color for the frickin' curtains. Who knows? Maybe their kid was watching Sesame Street and Cookie Monster was on in the background while they were writing, and they were like, Cookie Monster, Cookie Monster's blue. I'm going to make the curtains blue. Obviously, that probably wasn't like a conscious thought. It was probably like a subconscious thing. But you know what I mean. And so this argument about reading comprehension and critical thinking is not new. And a lot of the people who are making these videos blaming BookTok for everything seem to think that, oh, this is brand new. I'm so clever for making this connection. I'm so clever for figuring out that BookTok is the problem. BookTok is the source of all evil in the world. Yay me, I figured it out. It's not. It's really not. I like I said before, there are pockets of the community that do have issues. I'm not going to ignore that. I'm not going to deny that that's true. But I do think that it is extremely misguided to blame all modern books that you don't like, to blame modern reading levels and modern critical thinking skills and modern reading comprehension skills of our young people on BookTok. I really honestly think BookTok is the result of this. You have these acts, such as the No Child Left Behind. On the surface, on the very, very surface, you're saying, we're going to make sure children don't fall behind. We're going to make sure they stay with their peers and they continue to succeed. That's how they marketed the bill. In reality, that's not what's happening. In reality, it's being used as an excuse to kick kids along without actually teaching them. Now, I am not an expert in education or child rearing, so I can't really speak too much on this issue other than what I've already stated. Now, another thing that I noticed is a lot of these videos pointing fingers at BookTok or articles or whatever you want to call them, a lot of them popped up about 2 or 3 weeks ago. You know what happened 2 or 3 weeks ago? They were talking about banning TikTok. Then they banned TikTok. Then they brought it back. So I do think that some of this was because BookTok was really popping on the algorithm because everybody was talking about it. So all these bloggers and vloggers and whoever were like, I'm going to ride that gravy train and make a BookTok video. I get it. You want to rage bait, that's between you and whatever deity you align with. You and your rage bait can go over there. Now, another thing that I do think we need to consider is that there's a phrase, the customer is always right in matter of taste. There are people who read books for fun. They read them to escape reality. And if they read a book and they're entertained by it, they're allowed to like that book. They're allowed to talk about being entertained by that book. You are also well within your right to dislike that book. But just because that book is talked about on TikTok and you disliked it, doesn't mean everybody on TikTok is stupid. Doesn't give you the right to throw every single person under the bus. Doesn't give you the right to sit there and say, I disliked this book that was popular on TikTok, therefore I have decided TikTok has ruined books. Get off your high horse, sir. So, in short, this is the shortened, condensed version. In short, I really think that a lot of the issues that people have with modern books and modern reading habits are the result of years of shifts in education. I think they are the result in years of shift in priority. All of that being said, if there's a popular book and you read it and you didn't like it, that's fine. Likewise, if there's a popular book and you read it and you loved it, good for you. We all need to stop pointing fingers and making fun of each other. Now, if someone does something that is highly inappropriate, that's different. You can critique their behavior. And also, you're allowed to critique books you don't like. But do we all have to be such buttheads about it? I have to start over again. I'm sorry. To future me who's editing this, I am sorry. Another expert